Whether you like it or not, 3v3 has returned to Galaxy of Heroes, and we're doing something which we haven't done for a year, which is ranking all the best 3v3 teams from best to the very worst. Last time I made this video was May 2022, which was right before Datacrons. Datacrons made this even more difficult. 3v3 rankings has always been an impossible task. Everyone has so many different rosters, different counters they're gonna need, different teams they're gonna face, different Omicrons, and then Datacrons and mods. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna basically show every character used only once, and with a couple of exceptions, as we're gonna talk about, to try to show you the best places to put your characters, and hopefully you can try to put the teams together or as close as possible. Deal? Deal. So here's the entire graphic. If you want to see it now, there's a link down below if you want to download it onto your HoloPad. And if you want some more variety, stick till the end. I'm gonna show what I do on my free-to-play account to show another perspective of the game, and maybe that'll help too. And if you want to see me rank 3v3 teams a little bit more frequently than once a year, leave that like and comment down below. I know it's not the most popular game mode, but it is here half the time for Grand Arena, so it's kind of important, I guess. So for those of you who just want the graphic and don't want the loud guy talking, thanks for stopping by. But for those that want to stick around a little bit longer, let's go ahead and chit-chat a little bit more, shall we? So I want to talk about the Galactic Legends teams first in Star Wars Galaxy Heroes. Again, I tried using characters only once because some people complain when I do it too many times and use duplicate characters in different teams. And also, I highlight if a team's ideal for defense, offense, a shield is defense, sword is offense, and also you'll notice there'll be some yellow circles indicating you're going to need the Omicron to really get the most out of that particular team. So starting off with the Galactic Legends, Jabba the Hutt, a very difficult team to beat. Again, no Datacrons being considered in this equation, but Jabba the Hutt is a very difficult team to beat. Not a lot of off-meta ways of handling him. Maybe you can get through half or maybe Star Killer. Other than that, not too many options out there. Rey is probably the best 3v3 defensive team in the game. Of course, there are so many different ways to run the team. There's at least 30 different Rey compositions you can run depending on what you want, what you have, what you plan to use for offense, defense. It gets really complicated, but this is the best 3v3 defensive team with Hermit Yoda and Ben Solo. You'd be kind of a fool using it in offense, but some people do like to use Rey in offense for Rainier matches, perhaps. Sith Eternal. A lot of people complain that Sith Eternal doesn't have a lifter. Guys, he's kind of in a lifted status in the game. If you can throw him with Darth Malgus or Darth Talon, maybe even Savage, you can't really beat it in an off-meta way that well. Darth Malgus makes it difficult for Emperor Palpatine, makes it difficult for Wampa to solo, so Sith Eternal's a pretty decent team on defense. I use Sith Eternal mostly on defense nowadays. Moving down the list, Lord Vader. I don't want to get too much into the weeds of the conversation, but if you are going to put Lord Vader on defense, at least from an endgame analysis, you really want to put Thrawn in there to make it as hard as possible for that pesky bounty hunter counter from working. If you're in a lower division, Lord Vader is going to have a little bit more bang per buck, but overall, I think this is the best defensive team for Lord Vader. But if you're in a lower division, you don't see a lot of bounty hunter type of stuff, you can throw on Royal Guard and use Thrawn elsewhere. Supreme Leader Kylo Ren. This is usually the best way to use him on offense, trying to throw in Wat Tambor armor to just kind of make a super solo to handle pretty much almost any of these Galactic Legends teams you're seeing. Jabba the Hutt, Lord Vader, Rey. Might be a little difficult taking out Jedi Master Kenobi, but for the most part, this is how to make a Super Saints Supreme Leader Kylo Ren team. Jedi Master Luke. Now, I am going to show a couple different variations of this team because I think it's important to put on the radar, although we're trying to keep this as close as possible to one use only of the characters. This, in my opinion, is the best Jedi Master Luke team that you can use in the game. For most stuff, I'm primarily using Jedi Master Luke for maybe beating Darth Malgus. This is the best team to use it for. You could also go after Jedi Master Kenobi. Of course, you're going to need a different lineup. Then again, it alters. You're going to need Jedi Knight Revan at that point. Jedi Master Kenobi is one of the best defensive teams and one of the best offense teams. There's really no off-meta way of handling Jedi Master Kenobi on defense with a one-shot capability, and he pretty much beats all the Galactic Legend stuff in the game. Not much of an introduction needed for Jedi Master Kenobi. Although, we're going to put Third Sister and the Inquisitors in a Galactic Legend status. Although they aren't technically a Galactic Legend, they operate as one. They beat pretty much all the Galactic Legends, and very difficult to find those off-meta ways of handling this team. Now, here's where we get a couple of duplicates. I think it's really important to put it out there to show some variation depending on your roster and all that other stuff. There are a couple of very interesting Jedi Master Luke Luke scenarios. Now, of course, if you're going to split up Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker, you can go with something like this, trying to create a mega tank Jedi Master Luke Skywalker. And although we're not talking about Datacrons, this will be very nutty with this season of Datacrons with the increased max protection on the team. It's basically a timeout-like team. Or you could do Jedi Master Luke, for example, Jolie Bindo, Grandmaster. Again, a lot of teams are trying to keep this as simple as possible. Supreme Leader Kylo Ren, if you did want to put him on defense, this is probably the way to do it. That way you can make sure Imperial Troopers don't run it over. And for example, in my lower divisions of Grand Arena, Supreme Leader Kylo Ren still gets a lot of holds out there. And if you're opting to use Sith Eternal on the offensive side of things, Sith Eternal Wat Tambor is kind of the bare minimum you need. If you want to take it a step further, throw the armor, very similar to that Supreme Leader Kylo Ren lineup. But for me nowadays, I find in Kyber, Sith Eternal is not all that bad on defense. Let's talk about the Beskar tier. The king of Beskar, obviously Darth Malgus, almost a mini Galactic Legend. Not a lot of crazy ways of beating him. However, we are going to show it seems like the best off-meta way kind of to handle this team in 3-3 might be Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker lead with Mace Windu, Hermit Yoda. You can try your best to use Gas to get through it, but Gas struggles big time up against Darth Malgus in a 3v3 scenario. Try your best not to break up Darth Malgus too much. I know it's tempting to take Darth Rev and make its own team. You really want to put Darth Malgus in there. Otherwise, people are going to find a lot of easy ways to get through Darth Malgus. Make him feel like the Galactic Legend that he kind of is. We also have General Anakin Skywalker on this list. Great for offense, great for defense. You know, it's pretty bread and butter stuff. Not much to say. Commander Luke Skywalker on the list. A pretty staple team inside a Galaxy of Heroes. It's one of those annoying teams. It's not the hardest team to beat. It's not the easiest team to beat. You kind of need something decent to go up against the guy. I would recommend putting it on defense. Dr. Aphra, unfortunately, she's not as great in 33 as she is 5v5. The Omicrons just simply do not turn on in 33. BT and Trip have Omicrons. I don't recommend them. They don't do that much more. However, you can still do some good stuff with Dr. Aphra. Put her on offense. Put her on defense. Similar to Star Killer. However, Star Killer, I feel, is a lot better in a 3v3 scenario than Dr. Aphra. When you got Star Killer, you're going to have a lot of flexibility. I'm going to show a couple of other examples for those that want a little bit more flavor in their lives. But Mara Jade Palpatine is great on offense, great on defense. It's a great team. It's kind of the go-to to handle the raid teams. If you have a Star Killer, you see an opponent with a raid, you basically earmark this to handle that raid. Traya, a lot of different ways of running Traya, I admit. But if you really want to get the coolest and best Traya team out there, Traya Darth Nihilus Savage is a very deadly team in the game. Almost, I don't want to say quite like a Darth Malgus, but kind of getting into that neck of the wood. And of course, there's a lot of ways of running Han and Chewie, depending on what you have left over. Beskar, Mando, Wedge, Boba Fett. If you want the best Chewie Han team that doesn't use Commander Luke Skywalker, Dash Rendar is the next forerunner after that. He's great on offense and defensive type of things. Don't let this fool you. I don't know how many times I have to preach this. It started, I think, Catch Win after the past couple months. I've been really preaching, although it was really hard to get the message across because it was resistance. Zori is the best non-legendary team in the game, period, hands down. Don't argue with me, it's Imperial Troopers. It just simply isn't. This is the best free-to-play non-legendary team in the game. You technically don't even need the Omicron, and I think you're a fool if you're using this team on offense. You're missing out on so many potential defensive holds. This is one of the highest holds non-legendary teams in Galaxies, period, end of story. We're not arguing. Seer Junda, another pretty good non-legendary team. I wouldn't recommend using it on offense. It's kind of a boring team to use on offense, and it's a big drag. It's meant to be a timeout team with the Kylo Ren Unmasked, which a lot of endgame players don't need Kylo Ren Unmasked. If you're at an earlier tier of the game, you might need Kylo Ren Unmasked. This is a very durable defensive team. It almost feels like you have to throw like a Traya up against it. Very difficult to find something that's not expensive. Not quite as good as Zori, but still very good. Another team that I do love, it's the one time I like these Boba Fett side of Django. It's so rare, especially my guild, not playing Territory Wars, not great in 5v5 arena, 3v3 Grand Arena. This is the one thing I look forward to. Tusken Chieftain, if you have that Omicron, Boba Fett side of Jingle is really deadly on this team. Thank goodness there's a budget Padme team. Otherwise, you're kind of forced to throw something like a Traya up against us. This is a team that almost was impenetrable, but the Padme Amidala cheese found its way through, as we're going to talk about. Now, we're going to show some duplicate stuff down below for those that want a little more variety. If you're willing to split up your Lord Vader, which I kind of recommend if you're in more of the end game type of thing, because Lord Vader, if someone gets through with the bounty hunter team, it doesn't feel good that they made some cheesy bounty hunter thing where if you can maximize Lord Vader and Maul, split them into two separate teams, fantastic. A lot of ways to utilize Maul on offense and defense. There's a lot of variations of Star Killer, and I feel like this was kind of necessary, although it breaks my rule of one use only. There are so many ways of using Star Killer. Throw him with Savage Opress's Omicron. Throw him with Kylo Ren and Sith Trooper. That's something I often do on the free-to-play. If I want to use Palpatine, Mara Jade, and Vader for something, I could then opt to use this, and this still is good enough to beat, for example, General Anakin Anakin Skywalkers. We also have a repetitive use of Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker, which I think is legitimate because if you are someone trying to find a non-Galactic Legend way of beating Malgus and you think gas is too risky, because it kind of is, if it's a good lineup, Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker has about a 66% success rate. Ironic. Moving on over to the Kyber level teams. Wampa obviously on this list. Man, I got Wampa on the free-to-play account, just took it to 7 stars, just got the Omicron, excited for my first time using Wampa. Granted, it's only geared 12. The issue is once you get later on in the game, it's really hard to find an opening for Wampa, with Datacrons being a problem. A lot of great teams boxing out Wampa. Be grateful and don't take for granted if you're using Wampa every single grand run and always getting wins. Enjoy it. It's not like that forever, but still a Kyber level team nonetheless. Imperial Troopers, one of the ultimate non-legendary offensive powerhouse teams in the game, kind of like Wampa. At endgame, it's kind of getting boxed out nowadays, but you can still usually find a way to squeeze it through, or at least more so than Wampa in my opinion. Jedi Knight Revan. Now, after you do all of your Jedi splits, Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker, Jedi Master Luke Skywalker, whatever the case might be, having Jedi Knight Revan Grandmaster is very helpful. This is kind of my go-to way of handling the Resistance team, the Zorid team that is, in a safe manner. I think it's great for offense, and also something to throw on defense if you're in an earlier tier of the game. Definitely an all-around team. Try to save your Grandmaster to Bastila Shan and Revan for a leftover scenario. You don't really need to use Revan with Jedi Master Luke unless you're in a mirror match Jedi Master Luke situation or you're trying to go up against those Master Kenobis. We have General Hux. When you have that TIE Pod Omicron, you want to utilize it in some way. If you're not throwing Supreme Leader Kylo Ren on defense, that means you can use Hux on offense somewhere and beat a variety of things, especially things that have a lot of turn meter. Hux can just shut them down in a heartbeat. The Fennec team, this is really only a situational thing. I don't really recommend this team overall unless you're going up against heavy debuff teams. This is the ideal way of beating a Lord Vader team as cheaply as possible. And if there is no Maul and they happen to run a Datacron this season, which we're not going to talk much about Datacrons because if you're watching several months from now, it won't matter. Throw in OG Boba Fett, the normal Boba Fett, in place of Beskar Mando. But if there's a Maul, it basically mandates you need Beskar Mando on the team. Iden Versio. Not something I see on defense that often. You have to check your opponent. If they have a Wampa, don't put this on defense. If they don't have Wampa, this is going to make your opponent struggle a little bit finding a way of beating it. Or overall, this is a great way of handling a lot of things like Commander Luke Skywalker, the 3POC, and C-3PO. Very good counter for that. And then we got Sada Staros. One of those teams, if someone has the Hawks, a very easy team to beat. But if someone doesn't have a turn meter manipulation or control team, Sada can just go off the chain, and good luck getting a turn when Sada, Cara Dune, and Stormtrooper are running a circle. And the good news is this kind of makes it so Wampa can't be able to solo it too well. That's another thing you got to look for. Qui-Gon Jinn, good on offense, good on defense. On defense, it's kind of a dicey battle for the Bad Batch. On offense, you might be able to get yourself out of a Dash Rendar, Han Chewie situation. Very flexible team nowadays. And then the Bad Batch. I always get this question, why don't I run record? I've ran the numbers many times. I've shown this many times on live streams. The Bad Batch is just mathematically better with this lineup and not record. I know it might sound weird, but it just simply is. Having tech through the stealth, stuns, healing, tons of buffs, it seems to be way more valuable than Wrecker's defense up. It is weird, but just how the math pans out. This is going to be your go-to when trying to handle those Radis teams, Qui-Gon Jinn teams, and maybe some other things in between like General Grievous. And again, breaking the rule temporarily of one use only, I think it's just important to put out here. If you don't have Darth Malgus, Darth Revan and Malak are still a very good team on offense and defense. If your opponent has Imperial Troopers, don't bother putting this on defense. It's free banners. You get a lot more mileage using this on offense. So again, breaking my rule, it's kind of an important team still. And I want to remind people, even if you don't have Darth Malgus, it's still a Kyber level team in my opinion. 2 more tiers to go. Let's talk about the Erodium tier. Things get a little interesting here. The main meta is those first 3 tiers of Galactic Legend, Beskar, and Kyber. But Erodium and Chromium, you're going to still find some leftover things, some middle of the rung teams that can still get you some work on defense, occasional holds, and some interesting pickles they can get you out of. For example, Admiral Radish, you kind of see on both offense and defense. On defense, I do recommend putting casting in there. People are going to typically try to throw the Bad Batch, and if you can get casting and drop an ability block on tech or something, that's really going to mess them up. Highly recommend it. On offense, you'll be able to cheese your way through a couple of scenarios with Jyn Erso, not being able to get killed off, constantly reviving the team. Nice way of utilizing it. There's that Padme Amidala team. Now, Padme Amidala, of course, if you're in a lower tier of the game, you're probably using Padme, Jedi Knight Anakin, although you should be using Jedi Anakin of Qui-Gon, but you might have Ahsoka, C-3PO, General Kenobi. For most people, once you progress in the game and you're in Erodium and Kyber, you're probably using Anakin somewhere else, C-3PO somewhere else, Kenobi somewhere else. This is kind of the best way of utilizing your Padme. Throw in Moff Gideon, have him do control the situation. He gives protection up to all the support characters. Padme turns that protection up into courage, and she can one-shot a lot of teams. Use this to handle Boba Fett's Sign of Jango and the Tuskens, for example. example. All you need is Padme, Gideon, and some sort of Galactic Republic support character, whether it's R2, Shakti, I'm a Gundai, whatever your budget offers. Shorty, not much to say in this regard. Kind of annoying team to handle, but not too difficult to manage. It's just annoying. You gotta go through all the spare parts, revives, or use that in offense and try to cheese your way through some things. Oh man, don't get me started on Admiral Trench. I recommend this variant of Admiral Trench. If you're trying to make sure Wampa doesn't solo it in 3v3, this is kind of the best way of handling it. It seems otherwise kind of easy for Wampa to solo, but then otherwise Imperial Troopers can run over this. It's not the greatest defensive team, but it might get you some holds if you maybe burnt off the Wampa, Imperial Troopers, and the Bounty Hunters, and the Bad Batch, and the many other things that beat this. I don't know. It's a team I don't really like on offense and defense. You know, maybe could beat a Qui-Gon team with it. Mon Mothma, Kyle Katarn, boy, this team is kind of it's the team that fell the hardest from the Star Killer requirements, but still very usable. I use it, for example, to get through General Grievous team. So I wouldn't recommend on defense. Easy for Jawas, easy for a lot of other teams to beat. Still decent on offense. If you're feeling a little cheesy, throw the Tuskens out. I swear to goodness, this Omicron still doesn't work 100% properly. Sometimes the Tusken Raider doesn't revive. I don't know. I don't make up the rules, but when it does work, it's a lot of fun on offense to cheese your way through a situation because the enemy AI has no idea how to handle the Tusken Raiders that can't stop the revives. All that other fun, cheesy stuff. And on defense, if your opponent has no idea what they're doing, it works pretty well. Shakti's pretty explanatory. After you break up General Anakin Skywalker's file first, it's a great way of utilizing the leftover Shakti requirements. Knight says, I think there's two legitimate ways to split it. Unfortunately, I'm not as crazy about Marin in 3v3 as much as 5v5, but nonetheless, you can still get some great use out of Marin in 3v3 because she's kind of like a Daka. So I think we're in a time where you can still have Mother Talzin, Daka Zombie, handle things like General Grievous and other splits like that. And then you can go with the Saj Ventress of Marin. Marin's kind of like Daka, and if you have the Saj Omicron, you could really try to ramp her up a bit more risky than the Mother Talzin lineup, but I think we're at a time where you can kind of split them off. I wouldn't recommend them on defense, though. Pretty much from here on out, there's not too many defensive things I recommend in the Erodium and Chromium tier, but if you have Hondo and you want to utilize them, again, a couple ways to utilize them. You could throw him with Maul. You could throw him, for example, with Dash Rendar, Sana Staros. You can kind of fit in a couple places. He's not like game-breaking without his Omicron, but if you can use him on offense with Quill and Idlov, and you got that pre-taunt scenario, you got the healing going on, you might be able to get Hondo to ramp up by the time Quill and Idlov dies, and you might be able to get something pretty decent. For example, Malgus cleanup if you're left with a Malgus solo. General Grievous, I wouldn't use him on defense. He's not that great in 3-3. You might not even use him on offense, but nonetheless, he's an all-right team on offense. He will bleed a lot of banners, unfortunately. And then we have your Bounty Hunter leftovers. It might be Aura Sing lead if you want a fast contract to get Mando. You might want to use Boss lead if you're going up against, for example, the General Grievous. Again, it's going to kind of vary, but this is how I usually like to split it. Aura Sing of Boss and try to get a fast contract and maybe try to insta-kill Savage or something like that. We got the oldie but goldie Newt Gunray lineup. Some people like to plug in B1 in there if you're trying to beat the Qui-Gon teams on defense. I recommend Enfistness. It's kind of an annoying team to deal with. It might bleed a lot of banners. It might get a lot of surprising holds. This was originally kind of one of the best non-legendary defensive teams for the longest time in 3-3. That title has gone away from them a long time now, but nonetheless, still kind of a cheeky team to throw that utilizes leftover stuff. Grand Inquisitor, not crazy about the Inquisitors before Reva. Of course, with Reva, the Inquisitors are a whole different type of ball game. It's not even close to comparison. I'm not really using this. Even before Reva came, I wasn't crazy about this team on offense or defense. Not the best legendary team in the game until you get Reva. Finally, we're going to talk about Chromium kind of briefly, and then the rest, we don't really go too much in detail. With the Chromium tier, Darth Vader, man, before he got nerfed, his rework was amazing. You could do so much of Darth Vader. You could still try to do some stuff. I wouldn't expect much nowadays of that. You'll notice I didn't put any offense or defense stuff under because this is, you're probably not going to put this stuff on defense. Tarful, unfortunately, not amazing. It might be okay on offense, but I wouldn't recommend putting on defense. Saw Gerrera, I'm still convinced that there's a better thing out there from. I haven't been impressed yet in 3-3, 5v5 with him, but he's just okay. You might be able to get yourself out of a pickle with something. We got Jedi Training Gray leftovers. Don't sleep on the old Ben thing. A lot of times people like to throw Droidica with old Ben. A lot of dodge going on, a lot of turbulence. Sometimes even Night Sister Spirit in place of Bears. It's mostly to be an annoying timeout level team. You got your leftover Mandalorians. You got your Ewoks. You got Akbar Omicron if you have them. Leftover Poggle Separatist stuff. Technically Geonosians if you're not using, for example, Geonosian Brood. With the other Separatist lineups I've shown, you can use Geonosian Brood and technically put it inside of this Chromium tier that we have here. All right, what I want to wrap up with, in case that whole chart isn't still good enough, it's impossible to make a perfect 3v3 ranking guide because everyone's got different stuff. I want to show my free-to-play count, how I do my offense and defense. Here's the offense split that I'd use for my roster at 4 million GP. And again, it might not be applicable to endgame players, Carbonite players, or even people people in my tier. Everyone's got different rosters, but this might give you some more ideas. I like to use Sith to turn on offense on the free-to-play count, handling Rays, General Anakin Skywalkers, and that sort. Imperial Troopers, very self-explanatory, same thing of Mara Jade. I like to use Sith Trio on offense since they're low gear, and I can't afford putting Savage there. My first order split, kind of important. I try to get 3 teams out of it, ideally. Kylo Ren, Sith Trooper, Panda. Then I usually use my first order TIE Pod Omicron with Phasma and another pilot. I try my best to get Kylo Ren to solo something. And speaking of solos, I try to get Savage to solo something. On the endgame account, I'm generally putting Savage on defense, but don't underestimate him. He can solo a lot of things like Iden, some Commander Luke Skywalker teams, General Grievous teams, kind of like a Wampa, which again, boom, thanks for the new changes with the whole shipments and the Crate Dragon raid. I got Wampa the 7 stars in like a month. I have the Omicron on. I'm super excited to try it out. Geonosians are kind of an important staple team for me on offense in the free-to-play. Darth Revan, we just unlocked Malik recently, so I'm probably not going to put it on defense. Kind of easy to beat for Imperial Troopers, but I can definitely get something done on offense. Vader, I generally solo. If I need a little bit more help, I bring in Thrawn to make sure we're passing turns over. Sometimes I do use Thrawn with some leftover stuff like Royal Guard, maybe First Order Officer or something like that to make some stuff happen, but you got some flexibility there. And of course, some bounty hunters. And in case you want to see what my defense looks like, I use the Premier Kylo Ren on defense. It gets me a lot of holds. In Erodium, I got my Jedi Knight Revan. I probably will throw Basilisk Shan in there now that I geared her up a little bit more recently. Some leftover Sith, leftover Empire again. The South Wall in Erodium is the most valuable zone. I usually count on Supreme Kylo Ren to hold it for me. I got to do some rearranging actually, because we got some newer teams. I've been building up to Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker, so I can have my Commander Luke and Chewbacca built up a little bit more. And again, kind of leftover stuff. Probably going to change that Basilisk Shan team over to Jedi Knight Revan momentarily. And then we have Iden Versio, my Dash Rendar. This again, please, if you have Anakin, throw him with Qui-Gon. This is one of my best defensive hold team on my free-to-play count. It's great. Almost, I want to say 70% of my Grand Arenas, I'm getting a hold of him. And then leftover Bounty Hunter stuff. And of course, the biggest ticket of all, I rely on Supreme Kylo Ren, of course, to give me some holds, but I also rely on Executor to try to stop my opponents from full clearing me, especially when I'm trying to punch up 6-7 million GP, whatever it is. And that's gonna wrap it up for today. I hope this video was helpful. I hopefully it gave you some ideas. Again, everyone's not gonna find it 100% perfect because of all the different scenarios and rosters that exist there, but this is at least guaranteed the best team or where the meta is. Try to get as close as possible with it all. And again, thank you for stopping by. Leave that like, comment down below, subscribe so you're not missing a thing, and always remember how it's great to be in the Empire today. The sun never sets.